Ever heard of a single line of code breaking, like hundreds of apps?
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, you have now. Welcome to another deep dive, where we uncover the fascinating and sometimes chaotic world of software development.
Today, we're going deep into the story of how one developer's actions had a ripple effect across the internet, exposing the hidden vulnerabilities at the heart of our digital world.
Buckle up, folks, because this one's a wild ride. It all starts with open source software.
The amazing potential, but also the potential for unexpected consequences.
Our mission today is to understand how this happened and what it means for the future of, well, everything digital.
What's captivating about this story is how it reveals the interconnectedness of the digital world, how a seemingly insignificant piece of code can trigger cascading failures.
Cascading failures, kind of like dominoes.
Exactly. But instead of dominoes, we're talking about code packages that developers use to build applications. They're essential for streamlining development, allowing developers to focus on building unique features rather than reinventing the wheel.
So there's this whole ecosystem of code packages, like a giant library of code.
Absolutely. Platforms like NPM, the Node Package Manager, act as vast libraries where developers can find and share these pre-made code packages.
Okay, so everyone's using these shared code packages, but then what happens when something goes wrong?
That's where things get interesting and where our story begins. Enter Azar Kosulu, an independent developer, and the company Kik, the messaging app.
Okay, a developer and a company, what happened?
Well, Kosulu, known for his strong advocacy for open source principles, developed a package he named Kik. Unbeknownst to him, the company Kik had already trademarked that name. They requested he change it.
Trademark issues, always a headache. So did Kosulu cooperate?
Let's just say his response was very direct. He refused. And this seemingly minor dispute escalated quickly.
Hold on, before we dive into that drama, can we back up a sec? For those who might not be familiar, what exactly is open source software?
Ah, good point. In essence, open source software is code that is freely available for anyone to use, modify, and distribute.
So instead of companies guarding their code, they're sharing it openly.
Precisely. This fosters innovation, speeds up development, and allows for greater transparency and security as more eyes scrutinize the code.
Right, makes sense. But back to our developer and the company, what happened after he refused to change the name?
Kosulu, feeling his principles were being compromised, took a drastic step. He removed all his packages from NPM, nearly 300 of them.
Whoa, hold on. 300 packages, that's a lot. Were they all super important?
Most were relatively niche, but one in particular, called LeftPad, sent shockwaves through the development world.
LeftPad. Doesn't sound very, impactful. What did it even do?
Prepare to be surprised. LeftPad performed a very simple function. It added spaces to the beginning of text strings.
Wait, you're telling me that a package for adding spaces caused all this trouble?
That's the irony of it all. In software development, even seemingly small components can play crucial roles. Removing LeftPad was like pulling a Jenga block from a tower. It triggered a chain reaction of failures.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this seemingly small dispute could snowball. But how widespread was the impact, really?
The fallout was significant. Think of it as a digital domino effect. LeftPad was a dependency for countless other packages, which in turn were dependencies for even more packages.
So like a whole chain reaction of breakages.
Exactly. When LeftPad vanished, it caused a cascading wave of errors, affecting countless applications and websites.
Hold on, before we dive into the chaos that unfolded when LeftPad went missing, we need to understand the concept of a dependency tree and how deep these relationships can go.
Imagine a family tree, but instead of relatives, you have code packages. LeftPad might seem like a distant cousin, but its absence can have repercussions throughout the entire family.
That's a great analogy. Okay, now that we've got a grasp on dependency trees, I'm ready to hear what happened next. Let's unpack the chaos.
So remember LeftPad, that tiny package for adding spaces?
Yeah, the one that caused all that trouble.
Well, when it vanished, it was like pulling a crucial support beam out from a building.
Oof, that's a scary thought. So what exactly happened? Did apps just completely stop working?
Some did, yeah. LeftPad, as simple as it was used in a lot of places. It was a tiny cog in a giant machine.
And when that cog went missing...
The machine started to break down.
You mentioned earlier that Facebook and Netflix were affected. How so?
Well, for those companies, it meant certain features either broke or started acting weird.
I bet that caused some headaches for their developers.
For sure. And for smaller companies, it could have been even worse, maybe even stopping their projects completely.
It's kind of mind-blowing how such a small piece of code could have such a huge impact. Can you give us an example of how this impacted, like, regular users?
Imagine trying to log into your favorite social media, right?
Yeah.
You enter your username, your password, hit enter, and dot nothing.
Oh,
Or
no.
maybe you're trying to stream a movie and it just keeps buffering.
Ugh, the worst. So how did developers react to all of this? Was it total panic?
Pretty much. Imagine scrolling through Twitter and seeing hundreds of developers freaking out about their projects breaking. It was chaos.
Sounds like a digital meltdown.
Exactly. Everyone's scrambling to find a solution, like in a citywide blackout.
So how did they fix it? Was it just a matter of finding another package that did the same thing?
Not quite. Remember, this is a whole web of dependencies. Many applications needed specific versions of LeftPad to work correctly.
Hold on, why would different versions matter? Doesn't it just add spaces?
That's where semantic versioning comes in. It's how developers signal changes between versions.
Okay, so what does that mean for LeftPad?
A change in the version number could mean big changes under the hood, even if the function seems the same.
So just swapping it out with a newer version wouldn't necessarily fix the problem.
Exactly.
Sounds like a real mess. So how did they finally solve this whole LeftPad situation?
Well, NPM, the organization that runs the Node Package Manager, they did something pretty drastic.
What did they do?
They actually republished the original LeftPad package using their backups.
Wow, that's a bold move. So they basically went back in time to fix the present.
You could say that, but it was a controversial move.
Why controversial?
It raised questions about control and censorship within the open source community. Some people worried that this set a dangerous precedent.
That makes sense. So they averted disaster, but this whole LeftPad incident revealed some pretty big vulnerabilities in open source, right?
Absolutely. It made everyone think about how much we rely on these dependencies, how we ensure the reliability of open source software, and how to balance the good parts of open collaboration with the need for responsibility.
Right, because with great freedom comes great responsibility, as they say. So we've talked about the technical side of things, but I'm curious about the human side. What happened to Azar Konsuli, the developer who removed his packages?
Well, his actions sparked a huge debate within the open source world. Some people applauded him for standing up for his principles,
Yeah, I did see that.
but others criticized him for causing so much disruption.
So it wasn't a simple hero versus villain situation.
Not at all. It was a complex situation with no easy answers. It really exposed some of the tensions that exist within open source. The tension between individual freedom and responsibility to the community, and between the ideals of open collaboration and the reality of things like intellectual property and corporate interests.
Wow. It's like LeftPad became a symbol for a much bigger conversation, a wake-up call maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It forced everyone to confront some uncomfortable truths about the fragility of the system and the consequences, even of seemingly small actions.
So how did the open source community respond to this wake-up call? Did they make any changes to prevent this from happening again?
That's a great question, and it leads us to what we'll be exploring next. Because the LeftPad incident wasn't just a technical glitch, it was a catalyst for change, prompting the open source community to really rethink its values, its practices, and its future.
This whole LeftPad incident, it really shows just how fragile things can be, even in the digital world.
It definitely exposed some vulnerabilities, that's for sure, but it also sparked some positive changes.
Oh, like what?
Well, the LeftPad incident was a bit of a wake-up call. It made developers realize that open source, for all its strengths, isn't immune to risk.
So it's like it didn't break open source, it just kind of highlighted some areas that needed improvement.
Exactly. And the open source community is pretty resilient. They took this incident and used it as an opportunity to improve things.
Okay, so what kinds of changes happened as a result?
Well, one of the most immediate things was a bunch of new tools to help developers manage those dependencies, the ones that caused all the trouble in the first place.
So less about blindly trusting pre-made code and more about understanding what you're actually using.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's documentation, always important. But this incident really highlighted its value, making sure there's clear and concise documentation for every package.
Documentation, the unsung hero of software. But did this incident lead to any, bigger philosophical shifts in the open source world?
I think it definitely prompted some soul searching. Developers started thinking more about the balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility.
Right, because if one person can cause so much disruption, there's got to be some kind of shared responsibility.
For sure. There was a renewed focus on code quality, security, and making sure packages are stable.
So it was less about moving fast and breaking things and more about moving thoughtfully and building things that last.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. The whole left pad incident was a reminder that even small actions can have big consequences.
This whole conversation has really opened my eyes to how complex open source software really is. It's crazy how a single line of code can reveal so much about how we build and rely on technology.
And the thing is, open source is still thriving.
Hmm.
Despite these challenges, it's a testament to the power of collaboration and the idea that knowledge should be accessible.
So the left pad incident, as chaotic as it was, might have actually made the open source community stronger.
Yeah, I think it definitely forced a necessary evolution. It was a learning experience for everyone. And those lessons are still shaping how we approach software development today.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into left pad. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, the next time you're using an app or browsing a website, take a moment to think about the incredible network of code that makes it all possible. And if you ever get the chance, maybe even explore the world of open source and contribute your own skills.
That's a great point. Thanks for joining me on this fascinating exploration of open source software, dependencies, and the surprising power of a single line of code.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.